Arrow Season 5, Episode 13, Spectre of the Gun. Now when this episode started off, I was super excited because it came on with an actual viewer discretion warning, and it was like, this episode wasn't, I don't even know what the normal rating is for this show, I never paid any attention to it, but it was like, this episode was rated TV-14 for LV, for language and violence, and I was like, oh, this is going to be a really good episode, and I thought it was just going to be really nuts, and when it started off, I was like, okay, I think I know where they're headed with this. We got a little bit of the flashback from Renee. We knew that that was going to end horribly, so I'm like, had some guesses as to what we might see, and some of the things we might hear is kind of what I was guessing. I was like, I don't know what they could possibly really add to the episode for language and violence because it's still normal television. So going through, or just from that start, I was like, man, I'm very curious what we're going to get from this episode. And I think the main reason for it was actually the assault in the beginning of the episode, and it's simply because that was realistic, and I think that was really where the violence part came in. I don't really know what the language was outside of them talking about guns way more. I mean, I don't know, but that I could see being the violence part was just that opening sequence, because that wasn't, superhero stuff. That was just like a real life thing. It wasn't Oliver like jumping off a building and he shoots a bow under a car that shoots around the corner and hits a guy in the nuts. It was like some realistic stuff. So I think that's where the violence thing came in, but I still didn't feel like it was over the top. We've seen them do it with the over the top armies. It was just more realistic because it was just like a random attack. So it wasn't anything really different that we'd actually seen. I think it was just it was really the context that made it different. And that's really where all the rules come from anyway for television. So I think it was specifically the context of that situation where it's not like, oh, this is the army of the supervillain trying to go after the heroes and all that stuff. So it was pretty interesting. I liked the way it played out. They didn't, like, as far as the rating, I didn't really see them do as much with it as I thought they were going to. But I still enjoyed this episode. I thought it was good for some of the stuff that we got to see. Of course, they got kind of political with it in this episode as far as gun violence and gun control. I'm curious why they decided to go that route. They had it was like a full-on, this is what this episode is about. It's like gun control and gun violence and gun crimes and who has crimes committed against them more and things like that. And I was like, that's interesting that they decided to go about that. And I heard that this is kind of the beginning of the team finally talking about that stuff, which I'm so happy because I've said this, so I've only said it like twice maybe, but every time I see Renee in a fight, I'm like, he's using real guns, killing all these people, and they have their whole spiel about we don't kill. So I'm glad that at least this episode brought up the gun violence thing and why he uses guns and stuff like that. We got like a 2.5-second appearance of Vigilante. They didn't even use it to reference the fact that it's definitely Adrian. It was just kind of like, here he is, he showed up again, he kind of felt his calling, like, I got shot, it's time for me to start taking some people out again. So it's still technically up in the air, but I think everybody has the same theory that Adrian is definitely Vigilante, and I still have the same theory. I feel like this was the episode that would have been perfect for them to just flat out show it, where it's like, they end up fighting or something, and maybe he gets injured, and maybe Oliver doesn't see it, but he punches him somewhere, and he grabs his wound or whatever. And Oliver misses it, but we as the viewers get to see it and be like, okay, that would have been cool just to have that moment where they kind of reveal it so we know it's at least getting a little bit closer to, I would assume at some point the team is going to find out that Adrian is Vigilante. But I thought this would be the episode where they kind of officially reveal it to us, and I was like, that would be cool because then we'll know we're one step closer to everyone finding out who Vigilante is. And they still didn't do it, and I was like, man, this was the perfect episode. Especially considering he showed up for 2.5 seconds to kill one dude. And I'm like, that was pointless. I thought he was just going to show up in the later part of the episode, and that's when we get that clue. But it was like that one sequence, he shoots the dude, and then he starts shooting at Oliver, and he dives, and then he's gone. And I'm like, well, alright, that was a quick little shot, but he'll be back later. And he wasn't, and I thought that was the weirdest way to have him in this episode, because they didn't do anything to flat out say that it was Adrian, so there was no purpose to be like, hey, here's a little official hint that this is this character. It was just that he showed up, and we all still assume that he's Vigilante, but it was like, they didn't, help us out either way, like this definitely is or this definitely isn't. It was just Vigilante showed up, and that was it. I'm like, alright, well, he had that 2.5 seconds, maybe we'll get him, next week or something, who knows, but the way they went through, this episode and talked about some of the issues that the team has on gun violence, I really enjoyed it. I like some of the stuff they did with it. We actually get to see Renee get the flashbacks for this episode. We get a lot of focus on him. And personally, I really like what they did with his character. We get to see what happened. We find out that he not only was married, but he also had a daughter. And she's currently in foster care, and his wife was murdered at the end of the episode. And it was just interesting the way they went about it, because he's going through and it's like, we're getting these glimpses, of course, before he reveals like to Curtis that he was once married, but they go through things and it's like, man, we know how this is going to end. I thought both of them were going to die, if I'm being totally honest. I thought that's where the violence would really come in. It would be that both his wife and child were like completely murdered in front of him, and it would be like, gun violence, and it'd be like, I couldn't protect them because I didn't have my gun on me, which was his reasoning. And I feel like that shouldn't have been the line, because, excuse me, technically he did have his gun and it didn't work, but I think it was supposed to be like, if I had my gun the whole time, like, because his plan in like the first part of the flashback was that he was going to take his gun to the Glades, to the hockey game. So I guess that's what he meant by saying that, but it was a weird bit of dialogue, because of course when he says like, if I had my gun I could have saved her, and then we see the flashback and I was like, oh, he definitely opened the safe and got the gun and everything. I thought what we were going to see is that like the safe fell on it or something happened and it like bent the gun or like broke apart of it. Like if it fell on the hammer of the gun, you can't use the gun anymore if the hammer breaks, because it can't hit the pin on the bullet, or it can't send the pin to hit the bullet and actually shoot it. And that's what I thought happened at first. Like, oh, it fell apart and like something hit the gun and it broke something that, he couldn't use it. And that's what it meant. But it was like, no, he got up and he put the bullets in and he killed the guy. His gun, that guy's gun just happened to go off when he hit the ground. So it was a weird bit of dialogue. Like, I wish they just expanded it. Like, if he said something specific, like, if I just had my gun earlier or something like that, it would have changed it and we would have known what was coming, instead of if I had my gun and it's like, well, technically he did have his gun and it still didn't work. So it was a weird way to have that line lead into that flashback where technically he had exactly what he was saying he didn't have. So that was a little weird. And then other than that, I enjoyed it though. I mean, the way they deal with his flashback was very interesting, because he's going through and he's dealing with his wife and his child, and his wife ends up being on coke, and he's like, either there's no more of this or there's no more you in this house. And it was super crazy, because after that happened, all I was thinking was like, how is she going to get on this dude about having a gun in the house? And I'm sure that was, I don't know, I guess probably before she got back on drugs, but she was all over him about taking a gun to a super dangerous part of the city. And she's doing drugs like all over the freaking place inside the house. And she's like hypocritical of him over some guns. And I'm like, that's insane to me. Like, once you got a certain stance or on one really bad thing, you kind of just got to back off. Or at least see the good that it can do in some regard. Especially if you're doing a bunch of drugs and you all got money. You should probably consider the fact that you need guns as close as possible. But the way they handled it, I thought was very interesting. And then we get, of course, the final flashback where he's freaking out because the lady hangs up on him, and now his daughter's in foster care. And that's when he goes into kind of vigilante mode, because he sees Oliver kill Damien Dark on television. And it was kind of a quick switch, admittedly, but I was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. Like, he dealt with something very personal, and then things kind of fell apart. It seemed like he was in a different house, but it could have easily just been the same apartment just from the kitchen. It looked like it was a much smaller place though from what we saw in the other shots, because it seemed like they had a really big apartment before, where it was like their bedroom, and then they had like a really big living room, and then I guess the daughter's room was like on the other side. But when they show him like on the phone, it seemed like he was in a much smaller apartment. There's of course liquor bottles and stuff, like obviously the real easy way to show somebody's having a tough time. And it just seemed like it was, a much smaller, cramped space, and things were just much, much worse. So visually, I like the way that they did that, and of course him becoming a hero because of what he saw and what he experienced, and having just kind of officially lost his daughter, knowing that there was no way to win her back. He goes into vigilante mode. But he and Curtis had some really good stuff in this episode, where they had their back and forth about gun violence and things like that, and they bring up the statistics about Curtis and being black being shot like 3 times more likely and stuff like that, which I thought it was interesting that they brought that up with Renee, because obviously he's not white. So I thought it was interesting that of all the people, it would be Renee that they had him say that to, and that was just me personally, probably because I'm like, well, he's not white either. It's not like, I mean, it's still a fact, I guess. I just didn't look up the fact if it's specifically versus like Latino people and stuff like that. But I was just like, that seems like an interesting person to say that to, as if he wouldn't be profiled in certain ways as well. But it still doesn't change the fact. It was just like, that seems like to be like the oddest person they could have chose to have him say that line to, but they were the ones arguing, so it actually made the most sense. But the way they go back and forth, I thought was really well done in this episode. It's probably one of my favorite parts because it didn't get like over the top. They always were able to like cut it off, or somebody else, mostly Felicity, was kind of cutting it off. And then when it gets to the end, Curtis, after he realizes, what happened with Renee and why he has this very specific stance, even though they disagree, he's able to help him out, and he says that, we're going to fight to get your daughter back. And as soon as he said that, I was like, that's really cool. And then right after that thought, I was like, well, that means Renee's out of the show. Like, as soon as they win, he's going to be like, F vigilante stuff, I'm not risking my life now that I have my daughter back. And that's exactly what I thought. I was like, well, that's cool. And he's out of the show now. So, they might pull a twist and he doesn't actually get custody of her again, but I'm assuming it's going to be a happy situation where he does get custody of his daughter, and then it's like, well, I'm not going to be a vigilante anymore because I got my daughter back. I got to be on the straight and narrow, which he happens to do in this episode. He gets a job working as Lance's assistant. So that's an easy way to keep him in the show. He just probably wouldn't be the vigilante except for like various rare occasions or something like that. And I was like, man, that's probably what they're going to end up doing. He'll get his daughter, he'll quit the vigilante life, but he'll still be there as a part of the team because he'll be working with Oliver and Lance and Thea actually in the office. And he'll probably just have some ideas and stuff to help them out without physically going out anymore. So I feel like that might be where it's headed based off of them trying to get his daughter back. But I still thought that was probably the best part of the episode to me, was them like their little chunks throughout the episode, and plus Renee's flashback in general I thought was really well done, and obviously very emotional. Like he tries to save his family and his wife ends up dying, and then after that things just get crazier and he ends up losing his daughter too. So I thought that was really well done. The present day stuff I thought was interesting, mostly the ending. Actually, the ending may have been the best part, where Oliver had to stop the dude and he was like almost in tears just trying to help this guy not kill himself and stuff. That was actually probably my favorite part. That was really well done. But his course through the episode I thought was really good, and they do research on this guy and find out why he went through City Hall and basically went through shooting at people. And they find out that it's because the former city council decided not to go through with a certain order, which is the Gun Registry Act. And, they do the research and he tells them at the end, like, those guns were purchased illegally by this guy, so it wouldn't have helped either way. But we did come up with a way to do it where it doesn't hurt anyone. Obviously they don't explain what it is because it seems impossible, because it was like, it doesn't affect anyone, but it also registers people, which I wouldn't think, that's just me personally, but I guess that's my specific stance on it. I wouldn't think that making a registry would make people not buy guns anymore, which that just seems so dumb to me. That obviously if you don't buy a gun because of a registry, then that says something about you specifically, that it's got to be more. I guess that's my stance. I feel like it's more than just you don't want to be on a register, because if you got like they even say in the episode, if you got a license, you're already on file. We're already being tracked. It doesn't matter. But the way he goes about it, and he talks with the woman, like the one person who's like really against making the Registration Act and stuff like that. And they have arguments that you hear in the real world. It's a very political topic, the right to bear arms and having a gun registry, which, if I'm being totally honest, I personally think we should have one, because there's not even background checks for guns. Like, it's really crazy sometimes, the people that can get guns. It's like insanely easy, even in a legal fashion. It's really nuts sometimes. But that's me personally. But the way they did in this episode was, very down the line. We had people on opposite sides. Oliver kind of found a magical way to stay like right in the middle. But some people mention that in the comic books he's not like that. He's not in between on certain stances. He becomes like very, takes a very hard stance against like gun violence and stuff like that. So I thought that was interesting, that would be something that was missing from the character. He's so different from the comic version. For any of you who might not know him, he's almost the opposite of the comic book version anyway, so it kind of doesn't surprise me that that minor element has changed, because his whole character and demeanor is very different from the comic book version that actually exists. So it's like, that's just one tiny thing, compared to the other stuff we've seen this character do versus the comic version. But I still enjoyed this episode. Like I said, they took like a sort of in the middle stance, and I don't think that it was really their job to take a stance either way. And I prefer seeing stuff where it's balanced compared to just it has to be this way, or it's a definitive thing like it's this way or it's that way. It's just, hey, this is what it is. There are good points for each side. Obviously, guns can protect you, guns can hurt you. There's statistics, on both sides of the fence. But I like the way they did it. I think it was definitely it was without a doubt one of the most emotional episodes they've had for sure, with them dealing with such actual death, and it's outside of just super villains and criminals and stuff. It's innocent people dying, and an innocent man, or a man who was innocent at one time, hurt because his innocent wife and child were killed. And just the way they did the story I thought was really well done. And like I said, I'm very excited that this is just the beginning of them talking about this stance and them killing and using guns and stuff like that, because it's something they go through with this show, especially with Oliver, where they go through him as a character, how he's evolved from being a killer and stuff like that. So it's very interesting, and I'm excited to see where they go with it. Oops. But I like the stories in this episode. The other small story that they had in this one was with Dinah and Diggle, where Diggle was trying to help her kind of get out of her funk a little bit of, having a vendetta and that being like her work history and whatnot. And I like that portion. I thought it was really simple. It did bother me a little bit. It made me worry because it seemed, I'm not the only person that noticed this either, because I read another review. And someone else mentioned the same thing. I was like, it seemed like they were building up some tension, like some possibilities here and there. So either Diggle and his wife are going to split, or she's going to die. But if he became a cheater, that would be so crappy, because he's one of the best characters. And for him to, if they did that where he ended up cheating on his wife, I'd be so mad that they did that, because he's basically like the number 2 best person on the team right now. It's probably like Curtis is number 1. He's basically just super nice and doesn't like violence. And then probably Diggle number 2. Maybe Felicity and then Diggle. But Diggle, I don't know. The only time he really killed people was when he was in the army. So it's a weird checks and balance sort of thing. And Felicity didn't actually kill anybody with her hacking stuff. That was just showing how corrupt certain people were. She also did some other illegal stuff where it was just like, free money to this person, that person. So she did some illegal stuff. So they're on a certain scale. But he's one of the best people, like just overall, he's a good guy. So I really hope that none of that stuff happens. Because if they do end up together and it's cool, then I would assume that Lila has to die for that to be cool. That's how it has to be for it to be cool with me. Or they just break up. We haven't seen her in a while either. And I thought we would in this episode, because they talked about her a bit, and Diggle was talking about just him in general and things like that. So I thought we were actually going to see her in this episode. They even reference her as a part of the mission. I can't remember where it was, but there's somewhere in there where Diggle mentioned her as a part of what they were doing. So there's some weird tension there, and I'm like, I hope that's not how that ends up playing out, because that would really suck if he ends up being like a cheater, and I'd be like, that just destroys this awesome character who's been pretty much perfect. Like, he hasn't really done anything horrible. He had to kind of kill his brother because his brother was nuts and saying, I'm going to kill your wife and your newborn baby. That's really valid. So, like, he's just a good dude. He's been losing it in these last 2 episodes. Like, when he was beating up that one dude, he punched him so hard, I was like, man, she's probably dead. Like, I feel like he punched him so hard, he probably just shattered, like, everything in his rib cage. Because he punched him and he flew back and then fell on the ground. I was like, Jesus, does he have super strength? And we don't know, because that was a crazy punch. But we'll see where they go with that. It just seemed like they were adding some tension there. But I like this episode. Of course, we'd love to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, least favorite parts. And I want to know how you guys felt about them having a sort of down the line stance where it's like, they just mentioned this side and that side, but in the end it's like we came together and it's perfect. No definitive stance on what is or is not right about guns and how they should or should not be controlled. Would love to know what you guys thought about that. If you're interested, I know it's a political topic, but if you'd be interested to put your stance in the comments, I'd love to read that. I'd love to, converse with you guys about that and how you feel about gun control and registration and all that stuff. So if you're interested, some people get super uptight about anything political, but I don't care that much. Like, people think what they think, and it's like, I don't care. So I just want to know. I'm curious. I'm not going to get in an argument with you, but if you're interested in doing that, please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.